Michael Jordan pushing someone out of the way to get to my father in an arena
That's amazing.
was extraordinary.
Like no social media, like not even the dating apps?
Oh, I don't need dating.
I know.
I would like you to say who you think it is.
I want you to say it.
No, I want you to say it. The quote is, "Sweet Helen, make me immortal with a kiss, suck forth my soul, see where it flies." Now that's the quote. That's what I've experienced. It says, yes, whether it's like flying 2 a.m. somewhere or just seeing someone, it's very James Bond-esque, but whether it's just,
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, is that if someone says there's an extraordinary moment, I can literally bolt without pause.
Right.
And it reminds me of a great quote my sister said many years ago. She said, never pause. They'd be introduced to me by my sister or my dad, but be looking at them while they shook my hand. They couldn't even just say, nice to meet you, Jen. You're not seeing me at all. But I'm not even failing. You're just not even wanting to see what is here.
Right.
Well, how long have you been due for maintenance? The car tells you.
Yeah.
Our bodies don't always do that. There's more there. There's something I've always been, and you're realizing it's kind of who you are, Jen. And we're going to all join forces to take on modern day trafficking. You say that word and people get so nervous. And that's part of what I want to change society. So I'm in the prevention world. Mm-hmm. I want to get in advance and make it so this doesn't happen. The police know that this one building is where most of the crimes are happening in the world. And you don't hear like, so we're upping you never hear that. You just hear it, number one again,
right.
Number one again,
right.
Number one again. Okay, that was then. That's exactly what that was, but you still have all the same aspirations. You still have that little kid in the candy store energy. Go get it. He says, I'm going back to the start. And I literally had an experience that all the great psychiatrists of all time would be jealous of. Young Freud, all the boys. Okay, here we go.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of 90who10. I am Jessica Entner, and I am sitting here with my co-host, Dan Eisenstein, and we have a very special guest today. James Haven is joining us. Some of you may know him from some of his charitable and philanthropic work. However, he is also the son of Jon Voight and the brother of Angelina Jolie. So thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you.
As you sit across from me, the first thing that pops in my mind is your dimples. And my mom would always comment on Jamie's dimples.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just staring at them too.
My
His
mom
jawline's
would
amazing.
love Jamie's dimples. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, clearly you come from a great genetic pool of lookers, I'll
back that up.
Yeah. You've got some good genes, my friend.
Yeah. You know what's funny is in preparation for the interview, I was looking at some stuff online and I saw a picture of your mom, who of course I knew, but it's amazing how much you and Angie look like your mom.
Well, first of all, we absolutely look like our mom. I'll give my dad, we have his height.
Yeah.
I'll definitely. And there's little moments. I mean, just to be totally fair, if you go back to some of his very early work, and this is true, like if you go back to Midnight Cowboy and you see him looking in the mirror, there's moments where I go, oh gosh, I can kind of see, there's my resemblance.
Yeah.
Right there. But definitely the majority of our features, I think, our big eyes and, kind of a certain structure of our face, I think is definitely.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was telling Dan, our producer, that, you and I just had my 50th birthday 2 days ago.
Oh my God, happy birthday. I totally meant to text you.
Thanks.
God damn
no
it.
worries. And Jamie and I go back probably 45 years. And he and I were on the same AYSO soccer team together. And this team was super duper competitive. And it was no thanks to he or I. He and I were the two kids out there, looking at the butterflies and looking at the flowers. And we struck up this friendship due to that, and it's lasted all this time. And in school, it's funny, he always had a couple bucks on him. And at school, they would sell ice cream, but my mom would never give me money because, I was a chubby kid. She didn't want me buying ice cream. Right. And I'd always hit Jamie up, hey, can you give me a quarter for some ice cream, right?
Back when it was a quarter for ice cream.
Yeah. And then, after that was at El Rodeo, and then in high school, we didn't see each other quite as much. And then he ended up living in the same building with my brother, and then we reconnected. And that was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years after, 5 years after high school. But since that time, he and I have had this friendship where probably 3 to 4 times a year, we'll go out to dinner, amazing dinner, just he and I, no other people, and we will just have the greatest time. And he tells me these great stories about his life, and I kind of share with him what's going on with me. And and then I get, these great encouraging texts from him, like at 1 a.m,
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you a late night texter?
I'm a lot of things. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the crux of our friendship, but I treasure it. I treasure our friendship.
Those friendships are special.
It's really special.
They are.
I love Jamie so much. Everybody in my family loves Jamie. My brother was very close to Jamie and loved him. My sister loves Jamie. My mom loved Jamie. I mean, he's just this great, great, great guy. And it's funny, he goes by this professional name, James Haven. And so we introduced him as that, but to me, he's Jamie. That's just
and that is the greatest name. When you can call me Jamie, and that's when you're really tight with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So real quick, before we even get into like all the other good stuff, we both noticed that you've got a little Swiftie paraphernalia.
Yes, I do.
What's that all about?
Well, first of all, this is one of the let's go back a few years. I've always been, I give credit to my mom and other individuals in my life that have affected me in regard to music. I love music. Absolutely love music. So, that's like my hallowed ground. And so there's two stories of Swift, but one was recently where I went to this, of course, concert film that, of course, broke all records and all that stuff. And I was sitting in the back row. And as the film ended, I went over to like what looked like 3 generations. So you have like the grandmother, the mother, and the granddaughter. And I just went, oh my gosh, that thing could have been like 6 hours. And they went, well, actually, the mother, she said, I actually went to it. That actually is pretty much exactly, they didn't really edit it at all. It's pretty much the whole show. And then I started to talk about like my experience at a concert many years ago, my legendary experience at a Swift concert. And then the moment that happened, the granddaughter essentially gave me this bracelet. And I said, I'm never taking it off. But then I also said something that to me is the greatest compliment of all time. And it's so absurd compliment. But the fact that it was actually said to me in that theater from 3 Swift generations, it will always be like the highest compliment of my life. And here's actually what I said. I'd seen the film in one of those like really great, like higher echelon Dolby theaters. So it wasn't just the normal movie theater. And as they were about to leave, I said, and I got to tell you, I wasn't able to go to the actual concert. But when all that noise of screaming started in the beginning, I felt I was there. And the mother literally said, we thought that was you. And I was like, okay, that is actually the greatest compliment of my life.
They thought that you were screaming?
That was me actually making that much noise in the back row. And I was like, okay, you can't top that. But that pivots to a legendary story that Dan, I know, wants me to tell. And since we're talking about Swift, I got to go there. Okay. I'm known for being a lot of things, but one of my greatest qualities, if not my greatest quality, unless you get to see it because you don't know it exists, is that I was named after James Barrie, who of course wrote Peter Pan. And the first line of Peter Pan is all children except one grow up. And that's my goal in life. I don't want to grow up. So when I come to a town, in this case, I was with my family at the time, and we were in England, and we were supposed to just basically stay on the floor. There was a photo shoot for the adults, stay on the floor, have a wonderful day, everything's taken care of, just entertain yourself, essentially, give or take. And we landed, and the very first thing out of my mouth was, well, I'm not staying in the hotel. I have to get out. This is England. We're not going to be here every day. What's going on? And so I kept like pressing like the security guards, the drivers, or whatever. And they said, well, there might be something. But notice while they're talking, I'm actually noticing things. Like there's barricades and there's things going on. But well, what is all this?
Yeah.
And they said, well, I don't know. Maybe it's like a concert. It's a what? They're like, I think it's a concert in Hyde Park. Okay, that's it. 20 minutes flat. We're dropping our bags off. Be in the lobby, VIP, let's go.
Yeah.
So happens. It's me, my 2 oldest nephews. We're going to the event. It's Hyde Park. Elliot Goulding happens to be playing when we first arrived. And they have like these 2 beautifully square with staircases areas for the VIP.
Yep.
And kind of like a hotel type thing they do as well. Okay. So I'm sitting there. I'm with my 2 oldest nephews. We're with security guard, whatever. And this random guy comes over and just says, hey, Jay, just follow me up. I'm like, what? Just follow me. Let me show you something. And he wants me to stand sideways, basically.
Yeah.
He's like, I want you to stand here. And I'm thinking like, well, I know Taylor finishes. Why do I want to stand? Like, because we're early. Like, why would I stand sideways if I get to be in front? Why am I?
Right.
You put some tape for James. Just please put some tape right here. James, stand here. Like basic. And I'm like, okay, I don't stand. So he walks off. And then all of a sudden, like, and normally, how like NDAs work and security, whatever, nobody would have said this. But I think because there was like an aura moment, which I didn't realize at the time until it was stated, that who that person was I was talking to, that the security guy, who obviously was a fan of Taylor and others, broke rank and kind of went, wow, I didn't realize you're that tight with Taylor's old man. I said, that's Scott? And she said, yeah. Oh, okay. Then I decided to stand there. Okay. But meanwhile, my nephews are going, I don't know why we're standing sideways. I had Carly Kloss next to me, but the whole deal. But it's like, I still didn't know why I was standing sideways. Right. Long story short, the very last song was Style. And she had the long catwalk that she came out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the catwalk goes off the ground. And you start to realize, oh, wait just a second here.
Wow.
And the long story short of it is she gets literally this close. So basically like 2 or 3 feet away from me. She's right in the middle of style. And she just goes, hi, James. In front of 85,000 people. And I fall back, I go crazy. And so there's my Taylor Swift moment. So,
I love it.
Yeah,
That's
so that was like one of those memorable moments.
I love it.
Yeah. So
it
there
was
you go.
the dimples, you know.
It was the dimples. I had to have that moment.
I'm not going to tell
amazing.
your girlfriend Miley Cyrus that you were, 2-timing on her.
Please don't do that. Yes, don't do it. Don't do it.
Jamie had a big Miley Cyrus period, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
No,
by the way.
I mean, well, that's a whole other story. I mean, it's real quick. It's just, I have never gotten more voicemail messages or text messages in my life over anything other than the Climb song, specifically from ex-girlfriends or friends who said, James, I just heard the song The Climb by Miley. And there's one lyric in the song that reminds me of you. And every single person has said the same thing. And that is, there's always going to be another mountain. And I'm always going to want to make it move.
Yep.
And so that became like my anthem. And then my dad and I went to see her actually at the FedEx Forum in Memphis. And my dad actually memorized the lyrics to the song, which was extraordinary, and sang it live, which was a great one too. But yeah, I think Miley's the greatest. And, obviously, amazing.
Yeah.
You like strong women, I take it.
Extremely strong women. Extremely strong women. And yeah.
Well, you were raised by a pretty strong woman.
I was raised by not only, and I'll define strong, because there's all different ways to define strong. First of all, yes, I was raised by a very strong woman, but strong in ways that were also just so there's so many ways to describe strong. Like if you're really in your own power, I'm going to use my mom as an example, and your kids, as people will say, you're the most important thing, and I love you more than anything. Yeah, but will you talk to me if I'm having, a teenage meltdown or whatever, even if you have to leave? That was my mom. My mom was like, it wasn't like, look, honey, I got to get going. It was just like, that stopped.
Mm-hmm.
There was no late for this.
Right.
There was full, what do you need?
Right.
And until I finished, or my sister finished, or something, or got us to a place, whatever we're talking about, she didn't play that card of busy, if you will.
Right.
And that's how strong she was. It was just like, boom.
But when I think of your mom, I mean, because seeing her at Roxbury Park, and you guys lived across the street from Roxbury Park growing up, didn't you?
Right across, right on the edge, where it's almost like city limit, which is a whole other story.
I was one of those kids too.
But I'll add to one of the reasons we had to later if you jumped there. Yeah, but it was right on the edge.
And I want to get on into that, but just when I think of your mom, I just have I just feel like this loving aura about her. Your mom was a very loving person.
Correct.
Really, just very loving. When I'm 5, 6 years old, probably right around that same time, right? My sister tells my cousin and I she's taking us to this movie, right? And we're like, we don't want to go to this movie. My cousin is 10 years older than me. My sister is 9 years older than me. And I'm maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I'm like, we're not, I don't know. He didn't want to go. So I kind of jumped on the bandwagon of we're not going to this movie. And we go to Century City, the Schubert, which was,
right.
Yeah.
Where CAA is now. Yeah. I remember that.
And we see the Champ.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I leave in tears. Right. Okay.
I think it's impossible not to.
And I leave in tears.
Possible.
It's funny. And I've since then have made my older daughter watch it. And she was in tears too. Probably right around that time I meet you. Right. And I really had... So at some point, I made the connection that your dad is the guy from the Champ, right? Okay. And it's funny. My mom had a lot of friends around. My parents always had friends around. My mom had one particular friend who was so excited about your dad that he was in Coming Home, right? Which I had never seen. And I still haven't seen it. I'm embarrassed to say. I've seen Midnight Cowboy, but I've never seen it.
I want you to be very embarrassed over that.
Yeah. I don't know. At some point, there's this realization that Jon is your dad, right? And the funny thing about it through the years, Jon was always, to me, this is my experience, was always very friendly. And then I end up, living very in close proximity to where he lived. And I'd see him quite often and run into him. If your dad was a doctor or a lawyer, it'd be the same way with Jon. I have other friends whose parents are celebrities who they're an actor or they're a rock star or they're this or that. But with Jon, it was that's what he does as a living. He's Jamie's dad, but that's his occupation. And I even remember this one specific time where I'm having breakfast at this little diner by where we both lived, and he's there too. And he comes and he sits down next to me, and I think I'm really excited because I feel like he's going to start telling me like some old Hollywood stories, No, he breaks out a piece of paper and a pencil. I think you know this story. And he starts writing down which authors I should be reading, which columns I should be reading, right? And
that's him.
And that's your dad, And so I don't know. I mean, I guess it's weird for me to even talk to you about this because of our friendship,
sure.
But I mean, I guess for you, what was that experience like having Jon as your dad? And growing up with people knowing who he was?
Well, there's many different dynamics to it. The first thing I remember, and I don't know if this started, because obviously he would be, making movies or be alone as well, and then he'd be with his kids or whatnot. But I'm not sure how to say this because he'll sometimes play it off like, well, I wasn't as famous as this, or meaning you'll see where I'm going to say with the statement. But he was so accommodating to being out and about that it wasn't like the surprise photograph. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like the surprise interview. That I remember for a huge part of our upbringing, it was ease, which I can't speak for other celebrity families or fathers or mothers that the kids have to deal with. So it felt very normal that we could go to a restaurant in Beverly Hills or just a restaurant or whatever. And then once in a while, someone would say, oh, Jon, I love your work. Or, but there was also, why I'm saying this is because there felt like there was such an accommodation, there was also a respect. It felt like they weren't racing for him or they weren't trying to grab at him.
Well, times have changed so much.
So much.
And you're saying that made me think of two things. I mean, first of all, your dad had a huge career.
Yep.
But then he had like this big resurgence too. So and but also, not everybody had a cell phone in their pocket with a camera.
Correct.
Correct. Seriously, so you could go somewhere, and people did have it. Times have changed so much. People don't have. Before there was a respect, maybe somebody would interrupt you when you're having a meal, but for the most part, maybe they wouldn't, or they'd ask for an autograph. They'd wait, or they'd ask for an autograph and go away. But that's not the times we're living in now.
No.
Yeah.
Now people are getting thrown things on stage.
Yeah.
And
Now, there's also a flip to that, though. And that's why, I was pivoting to like where we were living. Obviously, everybody has a different upbringing. You don't wish this on anyone, but, we came from a divorced family. For a certain period of time, and this is the trick. This is what I was saying. It's just the trick before we started this. It's a very strange thing when either as a child there is expectation or you believe there is expectation. So we're living kind of a very modest life, but there's an expectation, as I said, from myself or from others that, well, of course you have money, or of course you have means, or of course, I'm thinking like to high school classic, Beverly Hills, high school type thing. Well, of course, you're driving a very nice car or whatever, instead of it being like, actually, I didn't have a car till much later in life because I didn't want to, again, as I said, expectation or my own expectation, I'm not going to be less than that. You have an expectation of me, I have to be that expectation.
Yep. Oh,
so I became
that's interesting.
Right. So I actually went the reversal. I became much more a loner at times in high school. So it was more like, well, again, I'm not saying it was how people perceived it, but it was like, oh, well, he's above this, or he's not high school, or he's,
that's what happens.
He goes to other Hollywood parts. He doesn't do this. He's a bigger deal, So I tried to play that card when actually it was a feeling of expectation.
And the funny thing with go ahead.
I'm getting in here. Getting in here. You guys do this for dinner all the time.
Get in, because I want to say one thing.
That's true.
That's true. Get in.
But when you say that, like the expectations, was that lonely? I mean, that's a lonely place to be in high school.
Well, and that's what I'm at. That's what I'm stating is that I actually lived a tremendous amount of loneliness. And so I wasn't theoretically a latchkey kid, but I was a latchkey kid in that I spent a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
So we lived very close, as Dan stated, to Roxbury Park. I mean, they started to put these things up during our time because I would play basketball until like the midnight hour, right across the road. Or I would go right across to, the movie theater. I'd walk on the weekends and I'd go off and to see movies. Now, of course, there's one thing that's the most important thing that got me through high school. And that was the Lakers, of course. And any, thing that had to do with them started, of course, in grade school. And into high school, I was huge basketball, I still am, huge basketball fan. And so, that kind of was able to take a lot of my time away from being isolated. But as a person, I was alone. Yes.
Were you, obviously your sister and you are very close and you can see that you're very close and you also look a lot alike because you look like your mom.
Sure.
Were you guys very close were you guys having similar experiences during that time? Like, were you lonely but for her? Do you know what I mean? Like, were you guys close? And
we've always been close, but I think that, and I admire her for this, she found acting very early. Like she just immersed herself. And my mom was extraordinary because she had been trained in acting. And then it was like she was her greatest manager because she got her going. So it was like she found, when you have so much going on, no matter if it's good, bad, or whatever, as an actor, you want to put yourself and your instrument into something.
Yeah.
And so she found acting. And so she really went into that early. I then went to film school and studied film. And that was my passion at first. Now I kind of have a lot of different passions, but at first my thought was going to be, okay, there she goes into acting. I'm going to go into directing or that type of thing. Producing maybe as well. And that was a thought. But I always felt I'd be a part of the entertainment world.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny for me, when people talk about Angie, like for me, she's Angie. She's Jamie's little sister. You know what I mean? Sure. And thought about her that way for a long time, that she's Jamie's little sister. And then in high school, she was kind of like in this clique of people. And all of a sudden people started talking about how beautiful she is. She's so beautiful. Like a lot of guys had crushes on her and stuff. And everybody was talking.
I had a crush on her.
Yeah, everybody was talking about how beautiful she was. And again, still, I'm like, that's Angie. That's Jamie's little sister, And then all of a sudden, she's like this huge movie star. I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
there was not a lot of build-up. It was like she did Gia, and then it was like, and off to the races.
No, it was crazy.
Gia was insane. If anyone hasn't seen that, that is a must-see. Yeah. That's when I fell in love with her.
I can only talk about it from my perspective. Like I said, she's your little sister. I just know her that way. Yes, in high school, everybody talked about how beautiful she was, but then all of a sudden, she's like on the cover of every magazine. I'm like, I even remember like this specific instance, like being with my mom, and I'm like, Mom, that's Jamie's little sister. That's Angie. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Did you graduate from Beverly?
I graduated from Beverly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And John's your dad, and he's a big movie star. Meanwhile, I mean, look, you're living in Beverly Hills, but you're living, across the street from the park. I think you guys were living in an apartment at the time.
Correct.
And, if I ever do talk, like I was talking with Dan a little bit before you came in, and I was like, yeah, they grew up across the street from the park. They live in an apartment across the street from Roxbury Park. And he didn't expect that. You know what I mean? So I think you're right. There was people had an expectation of maybe what you were living different from what it actually was. And for me, you and I have just had this connection from day one. I mean, none of that stuff ever really played into our relationship. Fast forward to just after high school, Angie explodes on the scene. What was that like for you?
Well, the thing about it was, which is what I love about our family, is it was phenomenal. Let's just put it that way. Because it was like, I knew how great she was and I wanted to see everyone else see it. So for me, there was just this, joy.
Yeah.
There was just tremendous joy of, I remember when my mom and I were in the Village Theater in Westwood, and the very first time the Tomb Raider trailer played, and people went ballistic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just like, yeah.
And your mom must have been so proud.
Oh, yeah. Beyond. So I loved it all. And then I also was very blessed to experience a lot of what that was, which was, I'm always back to the little kid in me and the showmanship of life, being at premieres, being at award shows, being at whatever. I love all that.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
It's very different. I would be that person. Like if I was a music star who would be signing autographs till like 6 in the morning.
I love that. I love that type you can say that.
Oh,
that's great.
There's no question. Question. So for me, it was just like, it was like Neverland. It was just like this feeling of like, okay, now we just get to play in a larger reality of fantasy. And really enjoy it. And
that's interesting though that you said of fantasy.
Oh yeah.
Because it is, it's a moment.
It's a moment.
Not real.
It's just a moment. No, it's just a moment.
Yep.
And then like in my own life, the tricky part is to just, and now things are starting to really cook, which is amazing. But there was a time where just to pivot a second, I always wanted to be a part of all this. And so it never wavered. You know what I mean? It just on my own part, just like I always wanted to be that director, as I told you in the very beginning, and always wanted to be the actor and all this other stuff. And, so yeah. And then I found other things.
Well, no, that's actually just if we can touch on that for a second, because obviously you come from a really well-known family from your dad. And then, of course, your sister is this huge superstar. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But like, how has that felt? Because you're watching her take off. Like, how did you navigate that? Because it's got to be a mixture of pride, but also like, I'd love that too. Like,
well, and the thing is, that's exactly right. I mean, I would feel all different kinds of things. It would be hard to be a part of certain moments and then to go kind of back to my reality, if you will.
Right.
And go, okay, and this is very honest. This next statement is going to sound a little crazy to some people because I think I have a certain persona that I've come across either, as I said, expectation or my own expectation. But I think I have this like persona that's like, James has got it. Like he's got the life. He's got this. I just have a way of coming across very like almost poker face. Like you just, with drama, like he's got it. But the reality is that, at times it's been very difficult because you start to question sometimes your own value or your own abilities or your own whatever, because this is the part I was about to say, it's like going to sound crazy honest, but it's like, not that I want to just jump in and do a procedural or do some kind of quick streaming service show. But I remember there were times where in my own life, I'd go, I don't understand this. Like, no one's even asking me, like, do you act? Or, would you want to do something like this? Because the PR alone will give you press. And we know that's marketing, and that's money. So if I have any, it's like, kind of like subtext here. If I have any talent at all, you're going to benefit and we're going to have, but it just felt like everybody was like, nice to meet you, James. And then it'd be like, goodbye. Or the worst thing they would do, which is still like, ugh, to this day, is they'd be introduced to me by my sister or my dad, but be looking at them while they shook my hand. They couldn't even just say, nice to meet you, James. You became part of them. It's like, nice to meet you. Yep. And so that was a whole thing. But then again, it would double down, like, you're not seeing me at all. But I'm not even failing. You're just not even wanting to see what is here. Right. And I used to just always be like fathomed by that. Like, just like, I know this sounds, Hollywood, as they say, and this sounds crazy at times where you go, no, this is almost the craziest thing I've ever seen. Right. Like, I mean, you have a big presence too. But you're not a small flower. But just to flip it, I'm not making any excuses here. I'm just talking very honest. The other side was like, I think people like felt you didn't really want to act or you didn't really care about that. Like you came across, again, like a little aloof. Like, I don't know, that might be too. So that's what I mean when I keep going back to the idea of my expectation, their expectation, that it's like, I didn't fail at acting all those years, if you will. I didn't fail at directing. It was just like, okay, nothing, I don't understand what's happening here. Right. So it was an interesting feeling. Yeah. It's hard. Look, I mean, it doesn't matter what the field is. When you have people in your family, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, who've reached such levels of success. And then it's even more crazy when you have two people in your family who've reached this crazy level of success. I mean, it's even mild success is hard to measure to when you have this like off the chart. It's not as shiny. Yeah, it's not as shiny. It's weird. One thing that I thought was really kind of nice for me, I mean, the narrative I kind of kept hearing from Angie when she was in the spotlight and in the early stages, there was a lot of, which I'm not from a divorced family and I don't know what you guys went through, and obviously there were things that you guys were going through, but there was always this like kind of narrative from her that you were just her protector, her big brother. I feel that with my sister, my sister's always been there for me, good or bad, indifferent, she's always been there for me. And that was kind of like the vibe I was getting. Your name would come up a lot in interviews with Angie. And that was always the vibe. And for me, I'm like, of course Jamie was that way. I feel like if I needed you, you'd be my protector. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. You're that guy, so that didn't surprise me in the least, but it was nice that she kind of shined a light on that. Well, by the way, that means the world you felt that same way. And of course, that's also been a huge part of my life, which we can pivot in a second to. But yeah, I'm definitely her protector. And I've realized that it's a huge part of who I am. It's like my keychain has the character from the Peanuts cartoon Linus, and I fell in love with him when I was a little child. And of course, he's got the security blanket. He's the greatest. He's my favorite. He's the greatest. Too. And then, of course, my whole brand is Safe Haven. And then the idea is I protect children in all aspects. So it kind of like it was a part of my life that I didn't realize was going to be when I first, was thinking of Hollywood, and when I was thinking of directing, and I was thinking of acting and all that other stuff. And then I found this whole other thing. It's like, wait a minute, this is maybe the real depths of what I'm supposed to be here. And also through film and entertainment, which I'll get to later. But just there's more there. There's something I've always been, and you're realizing it's kind of who you are, Jam. And that's what I want to talk about. That's, a little bit about who you are and what got you to where you are. Sure. But, being close to you, I know what are the passions in your life. Yeah. And I know that you're very charitable. I know that you're very involved with mental health awareness, with human trafficking and protection. Absolutely. And we can talk about that and what you've been up to. And then I know that you also have movie projects going. And I remember going to see the movie that you made with your dad about the priest. That was awesome. That was great. It was kind of almost like I don't know what was first or not, but it was kind of like a precursor to Doubt. Very similar kind of storyline, Yeah. So let's talk about it. Well, that's actually a perfect pivot because at some point that film's going to be released. So I'll just do a little, thing for it. It's called Court of Conscience. It's the last film, sadly, that the great Anton Yelchin is in. Yeah. It'll be released probably early this spring, 2024. After my dad is also in it. Won't give too much away of what it's about, but it's basically a conversation between a priest and a cardinal and what happens. But just to go back in time really fast, and I'll get back to my work. Back to my mom being so strong. This is something back to the idea of protecting. Mom, I love you, by the way. Okay. When the abuses in the Catholic Church broke in the Boston Globe in the early 2000s, I was with her at that moment. And she was raised with that faith. And I remember in that exact moment, just exactly how she reacted. It wasn't just like shock or sadness. It was, that's it. I've had it. And that's the boldness that I, first of all, witnessed, but also that's the boldness that it takes with whether it's the abuses in the church, whether it's child abuse in general, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's any kind of thing. It's that kind of boldness. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to bring forth. It's like all the work I'm doing, whether it's in human trafficking, to make sure that airports are properly, doing what should be done to prevent it, whether it's prevention in communities, whether it's prevention in business. It's not as hard as you think. Mm-hmm. You just have to be bold and say, let's take this on. And then it all ties back to the ills of our society, because like I was saying earlier in the podcast, what happens to us as children will affect us the rest of our lives. So if you think there's a 13-year-old girl, which is the average age of when trafficking begins, right now in Orange County, and she's not going to eventually, if she goes through that process, have drug problems, alcohol problems, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, try to kill herself. Now remember, this is all causing us money as a society. Mm-hmm. You're crazy. It's all going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the prevention world. Mm-hmm. I want to get in advance and make it so this doesn't happen. And then we can take care of other issues that we should be taking care of on a regular basis, stuff like that.
I will say one thing, because I definitely pay a lot of attention to what's going on in that world. And there's a lot of unknown factors into human trafficking that I was just made aware of recently with just vendors.
Oh, yeah.
And I did not know that. And that really kind of changed my whole perspective, because I think a lot of the times we do think of it as sexual human trafficking, and there's a whole other level that I wasn't aware of. And it's like made me kind of question like supporting vendors or not, or like, what do I do in those situations?
Well, and just to double down, I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and again, because this is the work I do, to me, it's like, whatever, but it's crazy that each year, John Wayne Airport is considered the number one origin for sex trafficking.
What?
Yes. And Hartsfield in Georgia is the number one for labor trafficking. And what I'm saying is these are stats. It's almost like going, the police know that this one building is where the most of the crimes are happening in the world. And you don't hear like, so we're upping you never hear that. You just hear number one again.
Right.
Number one again. Right. Number one again. And it's just because they haven't done anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
They simply have not done anything. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was saying, the work I'm going to be doing. But it's astounding how, a lot of times we as a society or anybody just is shocked how things are responded to. But it's like, even at the airports, at SNA, they have a place for pets. Yeah. And I just came back from Seattle and they have a place for children under a certain, level of height to play. But what I'm saying is that's great, but they're not ready for a room full of people who have been human trafficked. You see what I mean? So it's like, we're not going to look as much as you want us to look because we don't have the space for it. So it's all little technicalities like that. Mm-hmm. But it's like, do you call El Segundo if it's LAX, or do you put them over here?
Well, there's a whole other jurisdiction part.
That's right. Yep. Exactly.
100%.
So there's no like, boom. There's no like system. When we say Navy SEALs, we know what they do. It's like when you say, boom, that's what they do, And so that's part of what the work I'm working on. But I couldn't be more happy. But then again, this also ties back to the whole mental health thing, which is, and I really want to say this next sentence, because the Rosetta Stone of health, and I've been saying this for years now, the Rosetta Stone of health is mental health.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're 4 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, whatever. One of our, great artists, Lincoln Park, Chester Bennington, killed himself. I found out in an obituary later that he was adopted and molested by his father who lived around the corner. And you're going, what?
Yeah.
So it doesn't go away. No. So that's the whole point of why mental health screenings, awareness for our high school kids especially, if we could get that done, you'd see everything drop. You'd see suicidal ideation drop. You'd see depression drop. You'd see school shootings stop. Like it would all just go because you'd have that boom awareness.
So just to share with you, my mom committed suicide when I was 24. She was 57. I think your mom was also around that age when she passed, which is
right there.
very young.
Your
now
mom
that I'm
was 56. And your mom was how old?
57.
And my mom was 58 when she died.
Right. It's young. I mean, now that we're encroaching upon those ages.
No, that's very young. That's crazy. They should be.
And my mother struggled with mental health her whole life. And, you know, as an adult, I've had when I was 18, I suffered from severe panic attacks and I had a lot of my own mental health issues and I had a very unstable childhood and I had divorced parents and all this stuff. But it has taken, and it's a process. And I feel very lucky that for whatever reason, I've been very self-aware my whole life so that I've been able to dig through it. But not everybody has that. Not everyone is self-aware. And sometimes when you're dealing with mental health issues and you have to go back to see how it's affected you and you're dealing with that as an adult, it's very scary.
And a lot of people don't have the resources.
No.
First of all, they don't have things
and
available.
Chester's songs, my son loves Linkin Park.
Chester's amazing.
But when you listen to his lyrics, it's all there.
Well, the last big hit was Numb.
It's there. And it's like, of course. And that's why he was such an amazing artist. But it comes from pain, you know? It's,
First of all, I commend you. I just want to say that. Yeah,
well,
big time.
you.
No, because of everything you're doing, especially, because that's what we need to do. And what I love, just to pivot back to what you did, there's a quote, and I wish everyone alive could memorize this quote. It's just a simple quote. I remember I was watching a thing on trauma once. I went, oh my gosh, okay, wait, stop the whole, I want to see him say that again. And I'm going to say it very slowly because the first part's the most important. There's a Dr. Gabor Mate, I believe he's out of Canada. And a couple of years ago, I was watching something on him, and he said this line. He said, there's a wisdom in trauma when we realize that the trauma is not of ourself. And the key is to thus work through it and become ourselves. And back to your point, so many people don't whatever because they actually think that the trauma is them.
Right.
That's who we are now.
Right.
I had a father who was like this and a mother was like this. I lost that. That's why I'm like this. Instead of realizing, well, that's what you are right now. But to use just a simple car analogy, if a car needs maintenance, it needs maintenance. And it's just going to slowly have other issues until you get the maintenance. Well, how long have you been due for maintenance? You know, the car tells you. Our bodies don't always do that. We just have this way of people. I'm sorry, I'm good. Yeah.
No,
anyway, I'm back.
No,
I'm back. That kind of thing. Instead of just going, wait, James, are you okay?
Yeah.
No, you need some maintenance.
Well, because we push it.
That's right.
We push it because we have to function. And I think, because it's funny, because I have read Gabor Mate and I am familiar with this stuff. And I think some of his work with trauma, I think is fantastic. I have some of my own opinions.
There are some things he's controversial about. I just used the quote.
But that one is 100%. And I think what's true about trauma, and I don't know, I had a very tumultuous childhood, and much more so than anyone else I know, unfortunately. My mother was Miss World. She was like your mom, very beautiful, all the things. And she struggled and not manic, but like probably borderline personality stuff. And as a child, and I don't know how I knew this, I knew it had nothing to do with me. You know, I definitely don't feel like this is my first time here, if that makes sense. I don't want to get into this whole like hippy-dippy, I'm reincarnated. But I definitely feel like I have a different awareness than some people do. And so I think that kind of saved me. I mean, Dan knew me in high school. I could have really been a really wild
But you know
kid.
what's funny is I think that you always had this kind of like
wisdom.
Wisdom, a centeredness about you.
I think my mom needed me to.
You were
because
wild.
In that relationship, I was the adult.
You were wild, but you were but anchored.
Yeah, like I wasn't like having sex and snorting coke, but I was like
anchored.
I was around people that were doing that.
Anchored.
But thank you. Which is crazy because when you are going through mental health issues, you feel untethered. And the fact that for whatever reason, I was always my own anchor. I'm going to pat myself on the fucking back. The fact I got this far in life, I'm still shocked. Like I'm still sometimes going, how did I end up, succeeding in spite of? But I think working with mental health and talking about it and being vulnerable about it is what opens other people up.